Sup, my fellas, don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. Lu Sheng's attack caused Zhao Jai's spirit to shatter into pieces, making his body leave it and start falling toward the sea. He was confused as he couldn't believe that Lu Sheng was so powerful. Just before Zhao Jai's body could fall into the sea, someone appeared and grabbed him firmly by the shirt. It was none other than Lu Sheng. He grabbed the martial saint by the shirt and began staring at him intently with a piercing gaze, ready to strike again. Upon feeling this, Zhao Jai couldn't help but feel fear, and his eyes widened in surprise as he couldn't believe that he had lost. Lu Sheng approached him and couldn't help but feel excited. A smile appeared on his face upon seeing how surprised Zhao Jai was. He knew that for the martial saint it was unacceptable to have been defeated by a level 8 warrior, while being a level 9 martial saint. Lu Sheng's gaze was capable of instilling fear even in the strongest. Zhao Jai remained silent and swallowed hard, not knowing what to do now. Just before the martial saint could make a move, Lu Sheng gave him a strong slap on the face, asking if he was the god of war. Feeling the blow, his eyes filled with surprise. With a smile, Lu Sheng began slapping Zhao Jai repeatedly, causing the poor martial saint to open his mouth and start bleeding, in the process losing several teeth. Our boy mocked him, reminding him that he was known as the incarnation of light and someone with great combat style. Zhao Jai was unable to defend himself in this situation, and Lu Sheng continued slapping him forcefully. Not far from them were the marshals. The marshal of the central district stood open-mouthed and in shock. He couldn't believe that Lu Sheng was brutally beating up the martial saint. Despite being a lower-level warrior, our boy was using him as a punching bag. The eyes of the marshal of the east filled with surprise. He began to observe in silence and could not help but remain in shock. His eyes began to shine, and a proud smile spread across his face because from now on the army also had its own god. All the marshals who were watching the combat began to smile, and their eyes filled with joy. The marshal of the east clenched his fist, extended his hand to one side, and with a determined gaze asked everyone to remember this day since the army was about to receive an unprecedented bright future. Lu Sheng's slaps were making the seawater start to float. Just before our boy could continue with the humiliation, Zhao Jai grabbed his wrist tightly, making him stop. The martial saint had already had enough. Now his face was full of bruises, he was missing several teeth, and he had a swollen eye. Tired of the humiliation, he grabbed Lu Sheng by the wrists and with an expression full of hatred cursed him, saying that he was dead. Lu Sheng remained calm, started observing him, and with a tranquil expression mentioned that the one who should be afraid of dying was him. Upon hearing this, the martial saint could not help but feel both excited and angry at the same time. He placed his hand over his face, and his wounds slowly began to regenerate. He started staring intently at Lu Sheng, and his eyes began to shine intensely, reflecting a thirst for revenge. With a smile, he asked if Lu Sheng had finished striking. Lu Sheng could not help but go into shock and be paralyzed. His eyes were filled with confusion upon seeing how quickly Zhao Jai had healed his wounds. He had been attacking using the power of immortal cells, and each wound caused by the attack could take hundreds of years to heal. Zhao Jai's body began emitting a powerful energy, its force spreading through the air. He started gazing toward the ground and with a smile explained that no matter how skilled or strong Lu Sheng was, he was someone who did not understand the true strength of a level 9 martial saint, revealing that between an 8th level warrior and 9th there was an insurmountable gap like an abyss. Lu Sheng did not lose his composure, and his mind filled with many questions. He mocked the martial saint, asking what he was talking about. The martial saint's eyes widened with excitement. With a confident smile, he extended his hands to the sides, and his body began to release thunder. He was connected to heaven and earth and was still revered in the human world, so his power was infinite. His martial body had been nurtured for more than 100 years with the great force of heaven and earth, having reached a power that Lu Sheng could not imagine. Thus there was no way he could be defeated by an 8th level warrior. Far from feeling fear, our boy began to show a psychopathic smile, and with a piercing gaze asked if Zhao Jai really considered himself a martial saint, revealing that he was aware of how powerful a 9th level warrior truly was. For our boy, Zhao Jai was someone ridiculous since he had witnessed the strength of an 11th level warrior, therefore someone like him meant nothing. Lu Sheng clenched his fists, and martial fire appeared around his body, his gaze fixed on Zhao Jai, and with a calm expression, he mocked him by saying that with his current level of skill, he was not worthy of being called a level 9 warrior. Lu Sheng's eyes filled with seriousness as he prepared to attack, revealing that he was going to completely defeat him with the next strike and then see if he could still keep laughing. Seeing that Lu Sheng was ready to attack, Zhao Jai couldn't help but go on alert and clench his teeth tightly. He was surprised and afraid because he didn't know why he felt a murderous aura coming from Lu Sheng's punch. With a lost gaze, Lu Sheng began to stare at the ground and used the technique called breaking the void. Several copies of our boy appeared around Zhao Jai, surrounding him on all sides. He turned around and upon seeing this, he couldn't help but go on alert, knowing he was in danger. Just before Zhao Jai could react, Lu Sheng moved at the speed of light and controlling his copies, struck the martial saint in vital points such as the ribs, chest, face, and head. His attacks were so powerful that even the tough body of the martial saint began to bleed heavily. After attacking, Lu Sheng rejoined into one, and while surrounded by a golden aura, he began to descend toward the sea. Our boy's attack shattered the body of the martial saint. He fell to his knees on the ground, completely defeated. Now Zhao Jai's body and face were deformed and looked like a mutant. He couldn't help but open his mouth and start screaming in agony, creating a large pool of blood beneath his feet. His blood mixed with the water. The martial saint was not going to give up so easily. Using his regeneration power, Zhao Jai began regenerating first his mouth, causing his teeth to grow back. While his entire body was healing, he relocated his dislocated jaw with his hand. The only thing Lu Sheng could destroy was his flesh. His divine martial soul was immortal, so there was no way our boy could defeat him. Lu Sheng, who was quite exhausted, stood paralyzed watching this, unable to believe that he wasn't strong enough to kill Zhao Jai. In the blink of an eye, the martial saint's body regenerated as if nothing had happened, his power stirring the waves of the sea. He began laughing like a madman and mocked Lu Sheng by saying that if he had what it took, he could increase his power again and attack once more, revealing that he was the god of this world and someone immoral. Lu Sheng, consumed by exhaustion, clenched his teeth and couldn't help but feel desperate. He never thought that in his long time as a martial saint, Zhao Jai would have learned a divine ability similar to flesh and bone regeneration. He couldn't help but admit that the level of a 9th level martial saint, touching upon the mysteries of nature and the universe, was truly fascinating. Clenching his fist, our boy decided to follow Zhao Jai's order and increase his strength a little more. The martial saint, who believed he had won, couldn't help but be somewhat surprised to see that Lu Sheng wanted to keep fighting. The martial saint was in shock and dumbfounded upon seeing that Lu Sheng could still increase his power, thinking it was a joke. Our boy closed his eyes and placed his fingers on his forehead, causing a golden glow to appear, which came from the immortal cells. After concentrating, using his finger, he moved all the cells in his right arm and then shifted them to his palm. A brilliant flash appeared as he decided it was time to use the immortal strike. Lu Sheng clenched his fist, spread his legs, and with a confident smile gave the order for the martial saint to die. Zhao Jai, who was standing in front of him, couldn't help but go on alert and take a few steps back. His gaze fixed on the power emanating from Lu Sheng's fist. He had never before seen so many immortal cells together. The eyes of our boy began to shine, and while his fist was surrounded by a demonic aura, he prepared to attack, proclaiming himself as the true god. The smug smile on the martial saint's face disappeared, making him feel fear. Due to nervousness, he clenched his teeth. The thought of death consumed his mind, knowing that if he took the blow, he would truly end up dead. Zhao Jai still had an ace up his sleeve. Consumed by despair, he opened his mouth and spat out a card. He grabbed the card and began pointing it at the sun, activating its power. The martial saint clenched his fist, and with a desperate expression, decided to die alongside Lu Sheng rather than die alone. Lu Sheng's eyes began to shine, causing panic, his attention fixed on the card. He knew this was not good. He felt an unprecedented sense of danger, realizing that Thing was a tremendous threat. Despite knowing this, Lu Sheng began to smile and decided to continue with the attack since Zhao Jai had to die no matter what. Determined, our boy attacked the martial saint, making his head explode into pieces. He had decided it himself. Even if the King of Heaven came, no one would be able to save him. Lu Sheng prepared for what was about to happen now. He started observing Zhao Jai's body and adopted a defensive stance. At that moment, the chest of the martial saint began to glow. Zhao Jai emerged from the body, turned his back to Lu Sheng, and started running like crazy. Seeing this, his eyes filled with confusion. He couldn't believe that even in this state, Zhao Jai could still escape. The martial saint descended upon the sea and began to run for his life, but Lu Sheng was not going to allow this. While his hand was surrounded by a golden aura, he extended it toward him and prepared to attack again. With a serious gaze, Lu Sheng raised his hand. But at that moment, a bright light emerged from the sky. Feeling fear, our boy couldn't help but panic. His eyes were full of terror because more than anyone else he knew what was about to happen now. Just then, a purple portal appeared in front of Lu Sheng and began to open, making a bright light appear. Lu Sheng put his arms in front of his face and closed his eyes. A hand with golden claws emerged from the portal. Our boy's attention was fixed on it, and his mind was filled with questions. Just before our boy could do anything about it, the hand touched his forehead, making a magic circle appear. Lu Sheng remained silent, and his eyes widened without knowing what was going to happen now. The portal opened completely and a powerful gust emerged from within, striking Lu Sheng's body. The attack was so powerful that he now had a hole in the middle of his chest. This had happened in the blink of an eye, and he hadn't even had time to react. Reality began to shatter before Lu Sheng's eyes. He was bleeding and gravely injured. The power that had emerged from the portal was tearing his body into pieces. Lu Sheng began to fall backward. Despite being in shock, he knew he needed to replenish energy immediately. But when he tried, he was unable to move. The hand emerged again from the portal, cutting off both of Lu Sheng's arms. His strength was beginning to wane. He couldn't believe he was going to die, but he was satisfied since he had taken revenge on Zhao Jai. No one knew why a power above level 9 existed in this world. For having been careless, Lu Sheng had lost. Several seconds later, his body fell into the sea, and the portal disappeared in the middle of the sky. Both the marshals and soldiers were in shock and very afraid as no one knew what had just happened. The Marshal of the East could not avoid panicking and feeling worried about Lu Sheng, giving the order to all the generals and stars of the army to enter the water and search for Lu Sheng's trace with all their strength. Following the order, all the generals and stars who were on the ships began jumping into the water in search of Lu Sheng. Consumed by hatred, the Marshal of the East clenched both fists without knowing what to do now. The Marshal of the Central District placed his hand on his shoulder, and with a serious expression asked if he believed that Lu Sheng was still alive after having received an attack like that. The Marshal of the East did not lift his gaze, explaining that in 300 years of martial arts on this planet, there had never been such a young and monstrous genius, someone who, being at level 8, could face and defeat a martial saint while at a disadvantage. A figure like Lu Sheng was like an eternal sun illuminating the entire world. With a lost gaze, he turned to the others and revealed that he did not believe Lu Sheng would die after receiving an attack like that. The attention of the other marshals fixed on him, they remained silent. The Marshal of the East clenched his teeth tightly and with an enraged look revealed that someone like Lu Sheng, even if he were to die, would not do so in a place like this. His eyes were full of confidence, giving the order to everyone to spread what had happened and ensure that the entire Dragon Nation knew that the great martial saint, in the skies of